In Sioux Falls, we ask people to sign in. We will make certificates of attendance available, and I will remind everyone at the end of the session, and we will get names from our out-of-town folks who might need that sent to them. You might want to write this number down. If you need the PowerPoints, if you can't access the ones on our website, have trouble printing, don't have a computer, something like that, please give us a call. We'll mail that out to you. If you need a certificate of attendance, confirm with me tonight before you leave your name, and then we can talk on the phone. You can give us a call, and then we can get your address and mail that out to you. So our 800 number for Parent Connection is 800-640-4553. 800-640-4553. And if you're in Sioux Falls or our local Sioux Falls area, it's 361-3171, 361-3171. For those, once Rebecca gets talking, for those of you who may be having dinner or having side conversations, we would ask that you put on your speakers to mute, because usually the speakers are very sensitive when you least want it. And so that way everybody on all the sites, we have 13 sites across the state potentially open tonight, can hear. As I said in the beginning, we had 114 people registered and more people who called in. So we'll see who the sturdy people that are weathering the weather are going to be tonight. And I believe we will go ahead and get started. Before we get started, do we have any questions that we can answer for anybody? Okay, all right. Well, we are very pleased and excited to welcome Becky Kane. This will be her second presentation in this parent education series for us. She was here last year talking about what can parents expect, what are options for parents in schools when it comes to dealing with student behavior at school. As an organization that works with parents, we get those calls from parents who are saying, you know, if the school only calls me 2 times in a week to come and get my student, it's a good week. And so our response is, you know, there's maybe a way to do things better. And perhaps we can have some different strategies, because calling a parent to remove a student or calling the police to remove a student is not a behavior intervention plan. It's really opting out of a strategy to assess and really attempt to make a difference so that we can have those students doing what they're supposed to do, be in school and learn. And so we're so excited to have Becky share this information with us. I know that she has made herself available. These materials are on our website, and I know she has her number and email address in here, as she did last year as well, to be available. South Dakota Parent Connection works very closely with our South Dakota Department of Education, with our department, with the special education programs. We can tell you that we are very excited that we have staff that we work with who are very child and family centered. And we really appreciate the opportunity to work with them to better serve our South Dakota families and to support our kids with special needs to be successful in the classroom. And so please help me in welcoming Becky, and she will take it here for the next hour or so. Thank you, Becky.
Thank you. Well, yes, my name is Becky Kane. And I have been with the special education programs as a representative for about a little over 5 years now. And when I first started, I didn't think I'd make it 5 days. It was a lot. It was very overwhelming, very different from what I had been doing. I had worked at an adjustment training center for 7 years, so I was really hands-on with kids every day. And the switch from the hands-on to the paperwork and the federal law and all that stuff was a big switch for me. But in that, I've learned so much that I wish now, I wish I could work part-time with kids, because I've learned so much more when it comes to handling behaviors. I mean, I was just so naive and didn't understand anything. So, but one of the best things that I can do now, I think, is share that information with families in schools so they are able to use the information that I've been lucky enough to gather over the last 5 years and use that to help kids. I'm also a mother of 3. I don't know, how do I get my PowerPoint up on here?
I think we just have to to switch it to the computer.
Okay.
And
I know nothing about this.
we do
And I'm going to apologize, the PowerPoint that we sent out,
No, that's not right.
I have changed it. I'm one of those people who I was changing stuff today. I just couldn't.
Oh, that's not good. Yeah, is it going to come up?
I couldn't get the PowerPoint to be exactly the way I wanted. There was a lot of information. I was trying to cram it in there, so then I had to take some stuff out and change it around. But I'm going to go through, and feel free to stop and ask for questions. I do have a couple points in the PowerPoint that specifically to ask questions. But if something comes up and you need to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. And
Is it press to start presentation?
how do we get the PowerPoint back up here?
Yeah.
Anybody know?
I'll let Paul do it. No, there's both of us.
But I do have the PowerPoint available if you to send out later. If you want to contact me, or we can go through Parent Connection and send out the final draft that I finished at 4:30 today. Because I wanted to make sure I had as much in there as I could cram into an hour and a half. But first, we're going to talk about just basic behavior things. And I realize that we have some people who maybe know what I'm going to say, but I'm going to go through it anyway because it's really important to kind of understand just different aspects of behavior and some beliefs that are needed in order, from the parents and from teachers, in order to make changes in behaviors. The bulk of my talk is going to be on writing an effective behavior support plan. And one of the handouts was this behavior support plan. It was composed by, her name is Yes.
Can you read the name of it for people who aren't here?
The behavior support plan.
Yeah, it's just called the behavior support.
Yep. It's the kind of the bigger 5-6 page handout.
And was that on the back table?
It is back there, yes. There are some on the back, and these are available on our website to download. Yeah. And this is, as a parent, as a school, there's many different behavior support plan writing tools out there. You might hear them called behavior intervention plans, whatever. This one is very comprehensive, very, I'm not going to say easy to use because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of thought, but if you're going to write an effective behavior plan, this is what you need to start with. So we'll go through that and we'll have some questions. Then part of that behavior support plan is what's called the competing behavior pathways, which I think the handout you have looks like this, and it looks kind of jumbled right now, but when we go through it after we get all the information, also very necessary when you're going to write a behavior support plan. You're going to collect information in here, and then you're going to map it out using this. So 2 very important tools that are necessary to write a good behavior plan. And then if we have time, I'm just going to go through a quick couple things on motivation. I talked about them last year, and I got a lot of good questions on them. So if we have time, I'd like to get to that too. So the first thing to talk about, behavior 101. Students use challenging behavior because it works for them. They've found something that they've perfected it. When we look at kids, the first thing they learn how to do really is cry. And that's a behavior that they learn that gets results. And they didn't learn it because somebody taught it to them. That was something that was easy for them, and it came to them. It's instinctual. And that's how kids, unless we teach them a behavior, they're going to learn or they're going to do what comes easy to them, what's quick to them. And a lot of times what we see with that is behavior that we classify as a problem behavior. And behavior, we'll talk about this a lot. There's some different theories on this. I like to say that most behaviors occur for the purpose of gaining something or getting away from something, pushing something away. You can usually classify most things, stimulation, self-stimulation. Some people say that's, a behavior, a reason for behavior, and that's, I like to think of it as getting something, or a lot of times there's things in the environment that are too self-stimulating, and then you'll see behaviors where they're kind of pushing away. So most things will fit into one of those 2 categories. Students learn behavior the same way that they learn how to read, write, do anything. It's through instruction. How they're taught, whether they're taught from a parent or a teacher teaching it, or whether it's 6th graders learning how to act in the cafeteria, learning it from the 8th graders who have been doing it wrong for the last 2 years. So they're going to pick up and learn through what they see. And they're going to learn, they're going to keep doing it because they practice it every day. If you practice something wrong every day, you're going to keep doing it wrong. If you get feedback, whether it's positive or negative, that's going to keep you going, continuing that behavior, good or bad. And then encouragement, praising good behavior. Or sometimes you get the peer behavior that praises bad behavior and encourages them to keep going with the bad behavior that's working for them. Behavior science has been around for a long time. People have been studying behavior for a long time. And things that they've learned is, again, behavior is learned. We learn things from what we see, what we do. Behavior is related to the immediate environment. We act different in different situations. We act different here tonight than we did when we were at home, than when we go to church, than when we go to work. We act different in different situations. A lot of times with kids, when they say, I know they just don't understand how to act in different situations. A lot of times it's because it hasn't been taught to them, and their brains are still developing. We're saying now in science until they're like 26, their brains are still developing. So when you have this 12-year-old kid coming into a middle school situation, they don't know maybe that it's different than it was in elementary and that there's different things unless there's somebody there to teach them. We know that by changing the environment, and this is a big part of writing behavior plan. When we go through the behavior plan, we're going to talk a lot about changing the environment and how that is going to change the student's behavior. We're not going to change the kid to fit in the environment. We're going to change the environment to support the kid, and that's what this behavior plan does. We have to believe that behavior can change. A lot of times when we're working with schools, they have the kid who's now been the trouble kid for the last 3 years, and they say, he's always going to be this way, this is what's going to happen. Unless the people implementing the behavior plan and writing the behavior plan believe that this kid's behavior can change, it's going to be really hard. So a lot of times it's starting that conversation with those people who are in charge of making sure the behavior plan is done throughout the day and saying, you know what, I need you as a teacher, you as the superintendent or principal or whatever, to believe that my kid or this kid in my class can change. Because it's a lot about attitude. When we talk about teachers and changing attitudes, that's the hardest part about getting that kid to change their attitude, is getting the teacher to change theirs. And again, effective feedback leads to behavior change. Whether that feedback comes from their peers or from a teacher, whether it's appropriate feedback or not, is something that will be spelled out specifically in the behavior support plan. This is kind of the old way of thinking. I like this cartoon. I use it a lot. It says, we can't afford to save this one, but don't worry, someone will catch him. And then there's gangs and the judicial system and the welfare system. And I think a lot of times we've kind of gotten into the habit of, we're just going to get this kid through and get him out of here. And those kids are the ones that need the help the most. Those kids that it seems like, we should just give up on him and let him go. And, now they have to be in school till they're 18 and they're there. We might as well be doing the best we can to keep them from being in gangs and judicial system and the welfare system. Because a lot of times those kids, if you're a teacher and they're thinking about it from, we just need to get them out of here, those kids are still going to be in your communities. So let's make them be as well behaved as they possibly can, and those skills come from the school. This is something that I wish every teacher would bring into their classroom. This again is by Diana Browning Wright. I will reference her stuff throughout the night. She is the goddess of behavior, and I've gotten to sit in a couple of her seminars and conferences that she's had here in South Dakota over the last year. And she knows it, she teaches it, and here it says, no teaching strategy, whether it's teaching or behavioral intervention, is going to be able to have any effect on kids unless the teacher genuinely cares about her kids and those kids believe that the teacher cares. There's some kids that are going to learn in spite of the teacher. They're going to be fine no matter what. We're looking, that's like 10-15% of the class. There's other kids in that class who, no matter, who need this type of environment. They need the Fred Rogers and Carl Rogers to say, I accept you for the way you are. And Carl Rogers did a lot of studies on the impact of education on children and the way the teacher-student relationship. And kids don't learn in environments where they don't feel accepted and safe. And so these are, I wish that all teachers would just kind of accept this motto and bring it into the classroom because it would make it a lot easier for all kids. Basic needs, when we look at kids in classrooms, when we have kids that are hungry and thirsty and tired and need to go to the bathroom and need space, those kids aren't learning when they're thinking about when's lunch, when can I eat, or I'm thirsty, I have my water bottle, and most people have something to drink here because we know we're going to be here for a while. Some people spill their water, but but we work with kids so that doesn't happen. But really, when you think about it, if you spell out the rules for a kid, to have the water bottle at their desk, most kids are going to be just fine with that. There's not a reason that kids can't have the water bottle. Sleep is hard. If kids aren't getting sleep at night, a lot of times on medications or other things that are going on, they don't get that sleep, and it's hard for those kids to function during the day. The dreaded bathroom. There's teachers who say, they can only go to the bathroom at this certain time, and I know if I had that restriction put on me when I was working, I wouldn't be very comfortable most of the time. So being able to set up something with a teacher where when your student needs to go to the bathroom, they can go to the bathroom. Air and space. I used to work in a cubicle, and it would drive me crazy. I'm not one of those people who can sit in a cubicle all day long. And I just think about these kids who are expected to sit at little desks and be neat and tidy. And my middle child is not neat and tidy at all. She likes to spread out. And it's really challenging for her, and she does get in trouble sometimes for talking to her neighbors just because she's at a desk next to a desk and her stuff spreads. And, she's just trying to keep her stuff together, and then she will get in trouble for talking to her neighbor. Just because her neighbor's telling her to get her stuff off her desk. So we have to take into consideration, are there kids that need extra space? Are there kids that need extra time to get up and walk around? And this says, the little boy has written on the board, 2 + 2 = hungry. And he said, I went with my gut feeling. He's hungry, he's thinking about lunch, he's not thinking about math. So, can we have snacks available in the classroom? They don't have to sit there and eat constantly all day long, but is it possible that maybe they weren't feeling good at breakfast time and now it's 11 o'clock, they don't eat for another hour? Can they have a snack to get them through? So are there any questions on that part? That's kind of just the background, behavior, basic things that I have before I want to jump into the behavior support plan. Is there any questions on that? I'm going to jump ahead just for the sake of time here. The second section now that I'm going to talk about is, again, writing the behavior support plan. And I'm going to go through, and on the top of each slide there'll be a number, and that'll reference the number that's on this behavior support plan. So let's take it through step by step, kind of the way you would do it if you were having a meeting. Real quick, what is a behavior support plan? Sometimes it's called a behavior intervention plan. I like the word support because we're not going to intervene when there's a behavior occurring. We're going to try to support it so that behavior doesn't occur. Just looking at a way to change the environment to support the student. This is going to be pretty detailed. It's going to say who's carrying out what, who's going to do what. So it's not kind of, well, when something happens, I thought you were supposed to do this, I thought you were supposed to do this, and then nothing gets carried out. And it's also going to look and see, okay, now we've been running this plan for a while. Now we're going to revisit it. Is it working? So that's kind of the outline of what a behavior support plan is. Before you get started writing the plan, you need to gather information. You need to look at data on the behavior problem. Sometimes you don't have a lot of data. Maybe it's just an emerging behavior that you want to get a jump on right away. In a case like that, you won't need to write the huge behavior support plan. There are other steps, and I'll kind of go through that a little bit later. But if you're just seeing Timmy's starting to come into the classroom and he's being a little bit disruptive and he's not sitting in the seat, so what are some things that we can do for him right away before it becomes a problem? You might not have a lot of information on that, but you can do the observations. You can do interviews with teachers, parents, the student, and then looking at past information. Is this something that he did last year? Was this a problem in third grade? Now it's a problem again in fifth grade. What kind of information do we have from before? We're going to look at what's happening before the behaviors, what's setting that off. I'm also going to talk about something later called a setting event. And this is something that occurs maybe not directly in front of the behavior, but it can be things like if a student's on medication and they didn't take the medication that day. Or if sometimes when they're passing in the hallways, they have a confrontation with a certain student. when that happens, we know that this behavior is more likely to occur. And then we're going to look at what's reinforcing the behavior, because that's really what has kept the behavior going for so long. I don't know if you can see this. This is an example of a behavior collection log, and this one looks at different times, and you can make it for any behavior that you want. Maybe it's a spitting behavior, and he spits, and you want to keep track of how many times he spits. Between 9 and 10, you can do tally marks. You can do plus, yes, he did spit in this time period. No, he didn't. You can set it up to look how, this is in 10-minute intervals, so you can set up however you want it to look for, collect whatever behavior. Here's just another example. It looks at what the behavior is, and then it looks at the antecedents and the consequences. This is a really in detailed one if you have multiple behaviors that are going on, spitting, kicking, hitting. Sometimes he spits, sometimes he kicks, and you want to keep track of all this information. This is a really good one that keeps track of that. And if people are interested in this, I have it available. I can send it out. Also, it's in, there's a little cartoon. It says, let's get all the information we can think of, or get and think of use for it later. Get as much as you can. So when you sit down in that meeting, you may think it's nothing. 2 years ago, he had a fight with this person, and we kind of forgot about that, but really that could be what's bringing on this behavior 2 years later. Get as much information as you can and sit down and talk about it during the meeting. This PENT website, www.pent.ca.gov, is where I'm getting most of this information from. There's a book or a desk reference guide in there. It's like 300 and some pages long, so don't hit print and walk away because you'll have lots of pages. But it has all this information. It has the collection guides, it has this, it has everything. And whether you're a teacher or a parent, I recommend referencing this all the time because it has tons of good information. So here we'll get started on the behavior support plan. We'll look at number 1, again referencing number 1. Here it says the behavior. What does the behavior look like? What is the behavior? What does it look like? Needs to be observable. What do we see? Looks like we're looking through a camera and we're writing down everything we see. And we need to be very specific. A lot of times we'll say things like the student is disruptive. What does that look like? Some examples. They say, okay, a student's off task. He's off task. He's not getting his work done. Okay, when he's off task, what is he doing? Oh, is he crawling on the floor? He's playing with objects. He's bugging his neighbor. What does off task look like for Timmy? He has poor organization. A lot of times we see that for high school kids. When they get into high school, they have poor organization. I have poor organization. For me, it looks like my desk is cluttered and I can't find anything. But for kids, it looks like maybe waiting till the last minute to do an assignment and then just writing something and turning it in. Or loses assignments every day so they can't find things. What is it exactly that it looks like? Tantrums is a big one because tantrums to me are they on the floor kicking, hitting, spitting, whatever. But to a teacher it might look like something different. Maybe he just throws things and that's a tantrum. In order to get a good picture of what that behavior looks like, it needs to be very specific. Number 2 on the behavior support plan, behavior impedes learning because. And you also see this behavior impedes learning on the section on the IEP. When I go in and look at IEPs for when we do file reviews for schools, one of the first places I always look, because I like behavior and I like to see what kind of behavior things are going on, is the behavior impedes learning. A lot of times in schools that part is not marked. And if we see a student, especially if we see a student who's in the categories of ED or other health impaired with ADHD, that box needs to be marked. And there needs to be some sort of behavior plans written for that. Also, if we look in a file and we see this behavior impedes learning box is not checked, but there's been behavior assessments done on the kid, at some point in time somebody saw some behaviors that were severe enough to warrant an evaluation in that area, this box should be checked. This part on the IEP is a safeguard to keep kids from getting to the point where they get suspended or they need this big thing or they're getting in fights every day. That part on the IEP is where you first start seeing a behavior and you start working on it then. Because As we know, kids will keep upping the ante. As long as they're getting away with something, they're going to keep working it. And if we can stop it by checking that little box and putting in a positive behavior support on that IEP before it gets worse, it gets to have the teachers and parents and the kids a lot of heartache in the long run. But if we don't do that, if we're past that point and we're getting to the behavior support plan, we need to look and see, is this kid missing academic time because of his behaviors? Or is there some sort of safety risk for kids, for that student or the kids that are in class with the student? Is the kid being kicked out of class for behaviors? If you're having to come get your kid twice a week from school, that kid's missing out on instruction. So that's huge. Productivity. Do you have the student who's always up out of his seat doing other things, so he's not getting done when he's supposed to get done? Disrupting other students. Classroom instruction itself has to stop to take care of the problem that's going on with the kid at the time. So if any of these things are happening, those need to go into that second part. What is impeding his learning because? Number 3 on here looks at the need for the behavior support plan. There's 4 different kind of stages. Is it in the early stages? Are we able to get something in place as a support that's going to keep us from needing to implement something that's in the serious or the extreme range? When we look at things in the extreme range, we're talking about kids who are suspended already. These kids have done something that's got them suspended, where if we would have started 3 months ago when we saw the behavior starting, we could have kept that from happening. The intensity of the behavior, this is necessary so the people that are reading this behavior support plan can see what exactly is the reason for this plan. Why do we all of a sudden think this is so necessary? If you have a kid who's having behavior, we need to know how often it's happening. The frequency. Is it happening every 10 seconds? Are we talking about something that the teacher is constantly having to worry about? Is it happening 3 times a week, but it's a bigger behavior? Or is it, maybe 1 or 2 times a month, but we're seeing it maybe increasing a little bit? The intensity, when we talk about being very specific, here's an example of the screaming. Are they screaming onto their desk, or are they screaming loud so the whole school can hear it? Biting, I know like a lot of little kids, they kind of do the testing to see how much they can get away with the bite, or is he actually biting mean and pulling back, trying to break skin? We also need to know how long it's lasting. If they have a behavior episode, is it something where they're done for the rest of the day, or is it something that they eventually calm down or after 20 minutes? What are some of the predictors of behavior? Here we're going to start getting into those antecedents. What's going on before the behavior takes place? Like I had said before, things in the environment are very much a part of the behavior itself. First, we're going to look at the physical setting. Is it only happening in science class? Is it only happening in reading class? That a lot of times you can look back and see, well, a lot of times if there's an academic theme, you'll see more behaviors in that class. Social settings, different people, gang members, there are people, bullies in the class. You're going to see different behaviors when, a lot of times a kid won't come right out and tell you, I can't be in this class with Johnny because when I walk out the door, he's going to beat me up. But you can tell, watching the way he acts around certain people. Does he look scared? Let's see. With the strategies that are being used for teaching, is there not a match there? Is the kid not getting it, and it's frustrating for them? Scheduling factors. A lot of times kids really need a visual schedule. They need to know what's coming next. Is it every time that there's something different in the day we see him having behaviors? That's something you can easily plan for. So what is supporting the student to use this behavior? So what is in the environment that's missing? What does the kid need to be added to his environment? Or what does the kid need to be removed from his environment to keep this to keep this behavior from happening again. So we're going to look at the things that are in the environment that are supporting the behavior that we're trying to change. So if we're looking at things that are present in the environment, what are we going to remove? Is it as easy as moving his desk? I worked with a school with PBIS, and they had been having positive behavioral interventions and supports with the school-wide behavior plan, and one of the things that they had problems with is they had a middle school situation, and in that middle school they had all these kids passing at the same time, and there was a lot of fights going on, and until they sat down and really looked at it and said, it's easy enough, we can have the 6th graders pass, and then the 7th graders, and then the 8th graders. It took them 2 or 3 years to figure out that that was an easy way to change the environment to support these kids, and the fights went down dramatically. I mean, even when you just have less kids in the hallway, it makes more sense. It's safer for everybody. But then when you get those different grades out of there passing together, it was as easy as that, and it saved a lot of kids a lot of heartache. But until you sit down and you look at your situation and you assess things that are going on, you might not think about things like that. Peer status is something that's really hard when we're looking at changing a behavior, because it's not just that kid you have to look at. You have to look at everybody around him. And then that's a lot of teaching for that kid and maybe looking for a different peer support group for that kid. Some of the things that are missing in the environment that need to be added is there needing to be different things that are being taught to the kids. They need to be taught rules and expectations and alternative behaviors. Teaching kids alternative behaviors is really an important part of being able to change the behavior, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Anybody have any questions? I feel like I'm going through this really fast. Yes? I have a question.
I don't want to come across real strongly, but I worked at Adjustment Training Center and actually did behavior intervention plans at the ripe old age of 19. Mm-hmm. And now I have kids with behavior intervention plans. And I've tried to go to the school and ask them to do baselining, and I get, we don't have time. We don't do this in our classroom. We have 140 students. We don't do this way. All we do is a teacher report. Get a teacher report, and the teacher report says, well, they're just being disruptive. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. I guess as a parent, I'm really tired of hitting these walls when I know just little things need to be changed, in that 80% of the behaviors wouldn't be there, but yet I'm still on speed dial with the principal's office, and at least once a week my kid is getting suspended from school even though he's autistic and has ADD. What do we do when we keep hitting these walls?
I would say if you're going to your school and you're not getting the results that you need, Parent Connection is great, the Navigator program. Also, you can contact our office, and we can go in. We can't go in, but I can talk to the special ed director and say, look, we need to get something for this kid. We can't have kids being suspended. If a kid's on an IEP and they're getting towards that 10-day mark, that school should be really scared. I mean, if not from a let's save the kid perspective, from the let's save our own heinies, because we can't, if we get too many kids being suspended, then the state's going to come in and look at our programs. So
then I hear, well, this is the district policy. This is what we need to do.
There isn't a district policy that says we don't do behavior plans. It really is, like, again, I said, the changing attitudes part of it, and that's the hardest part about getting kids to change behaviors. And if you're hitting a brick wall with your school, feel free to call our office. We can always set up some sort of call and say, look, we have this kid who really needs a behavior plan, and this is how we're going to do it. At the state level, we really can't say you're going to do it this way, but we can strongly suggest using these forums. And if we have research and background history that says, this kid needs this plan and this is what's going to work for him, it's going to save him time and money in the long run. They have to look at it from that point of view. I know superintendents always like to, when you bring up it saves money, it kind of perks them up a little bit. So, but definitely, if you're frustrated and need some help, we can look at the Navigator program.
And this is Lisa with South Dakota Parent Connection, and
regardless of the school district, regardless of their funding, regardless of their staffing, students on IEPs or 504s, these are legal documents, and they have a right to a free and appropriate public education, and appropriate looks different depending on their special need. So if a student is being denied their education because behavioral needs are not being met, that really is, families and kids have tremendous legal rights, but unless parents understand and exercise those rights, they're of no use. So there is a wonderful resource called What Parents Should Know About Special Education in South Dakota. There is South Dakota Parent Connection that has free to families and to schools the Navigator program.
Already in that.
And then when that's not sufficient, there is South Dakota Advocacy Services, which are the legal protections. And so you need to follow, and you need to get these players behind you to do what can be done. And unfortunately, it is a tough battle. And unfortunately, some kids, the bottom line is, for some kids, we cannot get what we want for our kids. However, you're going to leave it better for the next family. So, get in there and get the connections and get the support that you need. And it is tough. There is no silver bullet. But, the Department of Special Ed programs in Pierre, what's your number in Pierre, Vicki?
773-3678. And the way we usually do it, if you say what district you're from, there's 6 of us in the office, and they'll either divide you up by district or by your region. Or if you say you're having behavior issues, they'll send you to me. So, yes.
Coming from Michigan, we needed to have something in writing. So if you write and say, my IEP is not being followed, I need to have a follow-up meeting, and have it in writing, they only have a certain number of days or weeks that they have to follow through. And that's always been recommended as opposed to just talking with a teacher and not having that paper.
And that's a very good point, that document, put things in writing, date it, sign it, and hand it off.
Yep.
Do not trust email, do not trust leaving a message. You want to document so that when you go to the advocacy, you go to Navigator, you go to the department and say, listen, I called, I delivered, I did this, this, and this. This is what the IEP says is not being met. And then you have the force of law that they need to abide by, or else they are going to be facing due process hearings. And so, you need to advocate for your student, because if you don't, it won't happen. And so, every parent on this DDN tonight understands exactly where you are, and there's a lot of support for you.
And there's always the option of mediation. If you want to go through mediation, contact our office, and we can start that process. And there is a timeline with that. Once you do that, once that gets put in motion, I think I want to say 45 to 60 days that something has to be done, which seems like an eternity. But I am available to go into school and go through this with them and say this is what needs to be done. Again, we can't force schools to do certain things, but we can strongly suggest that this is what's going to be best for your student. And if you're suspending kids should never be suspended once, but if they're being suspended more than once, it's obviously not effective. So why do we keep doing the same thing over that's not working? Is always my question. So if there's parents out there who have questions, on behavior plans and how do we get our school to do this, feel free to contact our office. Again, it's 773-3678, and our secretaries will answer and get you to the person who can help you get more supports for your students. Okay, any other questions? That was good. I know that's a very frustrating topic. We're going to look at examples. We just talked about things in the environment that we need to change. And these are things, some of them are very, very simple things like I talked to before. Things in the time. Do we need to give a 15-minute break for some kids? A lot of times when you give a kid a worksheet with 50 problems on it, that kid's first reaction is to take off or throw the paper or try to get away. It's too much for them. Can we make it so there's only 10 problems on the page and they have a half an hour to do them? A lot of times if kids know that they have that much leeway, it's not so overwhelming for them. I know if somebody sat me down and told me I had 15 minutes to do my taxes, I would probably just freak out and get out of the room, wouldn't want to do it. So we need to give them, more time or less task is a big thing to do. Do they need to sit next to a support buddy? A lot of times kids just don't feel there's anybody in the class that's they're connected to. They don't have any friends in their class, and then it's not a very inviting area for class. There's somebody in the class that you can pair kids with, which is good for both kids. A lot of times you have those kids in class who like to be. My oldest one is one of them. She's a mother hen, and she likes to help everybody do something. So there's always that kid in the classroom who likes to help out that you can find to do that kind of buddy program. Hands-on learning. Kids, one of the hardest obstacles for teachers is to know that kids learn in different ways, and being able to teach to all those different types of learning. And it's difficult for teachers, especially the young teachers, to, you get some teachers who've been doing it for a while and they can just kind of pick up on what different kids do and how they learn. But if you're dealing with a teacher who maybe doesn't have that type of experience, finding out how your kid learns. Are they an auditory learner? Or do they need more tactile things? If you can go into a meeting and saying, he learns really well with manipulatives if he can use them with his hands. Being able to have that type of information. Interaction, just the way that you talk with some kids can make a big difference. If you have a teacher who stands over a student, a lot of times it's very intimidating, and that right there can be the only kind of confrontation that they need. Sometimes just getting down on a level where you can do more of a face-to-face type thing. You can write that into your behavior plan. This is what we need. We need you to be use a softer voice. Loud noises scare him. She's intimidated by big men, so when you talk to her, can you kind of get down on her level? Really easy changes like that are going to be effective for a lot of kids. Now on to the any other questions on that part? I can jump through. Maybe we'll take questions at the end here. Says, can you help me, Ms. Martin? This wasn't covered in any of my education courses. A lot of times we're dealing with teachers who are coming out of college who've had no behavior courses. I didn't have any. I had one class through special ed at USD, and it didn't cover any of this, really. I mean, it was kind of, I don't know, very, very intimidating when you come out and you go into a classroom with kids and you don't have that kind of background. So a lot of times that's what we're dealing with when we have teachers who haven't had a lot of experience with kids with behavior issues. Number 8, look at the function of the behavior. Here we go, looking at why this behavior is happening. Is it to protest something or avoid something, or is it to get something? We need to know this before we can change behavior. I had talked to a teacher who had a student who before lunch was dumping markers off his desk, and they said, well, maybe we should take the markers away and then they won't do that anymore. Well, that's just going to let that kid find something else to do. Is he trying to do it to get your attention before lunchtime? Is he afraid to go to the lunchroom because the kids pick on him, or he doesn't have anything to eat, or he doesn't like what's for lunch? You need to figure out why the behavior is going on before you try to change that. Because if you just say, if he's really trying to avoid going down to the lunchroom, and your solution for that is, well, he wants to go to the lunchroom earlier, be first in line, so then you put him first in line. You say, you can go first and be in line first, and that's kind of not why that's not why he's dumping the markers on the floor. The kid's not going to understand it. It's going to be more frustrating for him, and he's going to look for other, probably higher escalated behaviors to keep him from having to go to the lunchroom. A real quick assessment, if you're working with a kid, this isn't always true. This isn't how you should base your functional behavior assessment, but if you're kind of in the moment with the kid and you're trying to figure out why they're having this behavior, if you have a kid who is coming at you and he's doing something that's annoying you, he's kind of smiley, or if he's crying, those are behaviors that are trying to get attention. We cry sometimes when we want to get attention, or we're goofy when we try to want to get attention from people. So if you're quick in the moment and your kid's coming up to you and they're kind of being annoying, trying to get at you, probably trying to get something from you, trying to get your attention. Whereas if you have the kid who's mad, who's clearly mad, that's pushing away. So if you have that kid who's angry, you can tell they're yelling. Obviously, they're trying to get away from you in most cases. So that's a quick, when you've got that 15, 20 seconds to figure out, why is this kid doing this to me? Check their face and see. kind of what that's showing you. When we look at labeling things in our behavior support plan for number 8, words like power and control are really shouldn't be used. We need to look deeper into what kind of power is he trying to get, because later we're going to look at replacing that negative behavior with a positive behavior that's going to help him gain the same thing. We really don't want that kid gaining control and power, or a lot of times revenge is something that, you know, they think that this behavior is happening to get revenge on the teacher. We don't want to give the child a plan that's going to help them get revenge or get control, but we want to help them instead get that peer attention or those positive comments that give them that feeling of power. Or being able to, kids a lot of times in classrooms, maybe things are going too fast for them, and they're in a math class, they don't get something, instead of saying, I don't get this, they have some sort of behavior that kind of stops instruction. So now they don't have to focus, they don't have to learn anymore, so they're kind of trying to control the tempo of the classroom. We want to be able to give them a tool where they can do that, a positive tool, but we don't want to give them that control of the classroom. So those are some kind of words to try to avoid for that section. And then those kids that are trying to reject something, protest, trying to escape, those things are, you know, are they trying to get away from peers? Are they trying to get away from the teacher? We need to look at those and be very specific when we write those into the behavior support plan. Number 9, we're going to introduce something called the FERB, the functionally equivalent replacement behavior. Here's where we're looking at something functionally, something that does equivalently the same thing as that negative behavior for this kid, but we're going to replace it with a positive behavior. What behavior are we going to put in place instead of hitting? Tommy walks up to people after lunch and punches them in the shoulder and says hi. That's Tommy's way of getting attention. He's trying to get attention with a punch. That's not socially acceptable for Tommy to do that. He can't go to a job in 4 years and punch his coworkers every day. So what are we going to give him that does the same thing? It gets his peers' attention. It gets him into a conversation with his peers. But what are we going to give him that's more functionally positive, that's more socially acceptable? A lot of times the kid can do a high five or a wave or a thumbs up or anything to start a conversation. This kid just doesn't know how to get into a conversation with people. So what he knows and what he's maybe seen other kids do, you walk up, you sludge somebody in the shoulder, and then you get some sort of interaction with them. So instead of doing this, we're going to give him the, hey, what's up, or something different that he can use. So that's what the functionally equivalent behavior that we're going to put in place instead of that negative behavior. And it's important to note that it has to be as easily performed as the problem behavior. If it's harder for the kid, if he's got to go through 10 steps in order to get the same result, he's not going to do it. If I could eat chocolate cake and lose 10 pounds, or if I could ride a bike and lose 10 pounds, I'd eat chocolate cake. So that's kind of, the kids are going to look for something that's the easiest way to get the results that they want. If you have kids that swear at a teacher, are they trying to get that teacher's attention? What are some things that he can do in class instead of, even the teacher, maybe he just hasn't been reinforced in the past that if I just raise my hand and wait, the teacher will call on me. Maybe he's had teachers in the past where he sat there forever, didn't get what he wants, so then he starts, things that aren't socially appropriate. So we need to note that and say, okay, in the behavior plan, this is what we're going to do. Instead of swearing, we're going to take swearing, we're going to give him a positive word that he can put in. Teacher, I need help. Something easy like that. Fighting is hard. If a kid is frustrated at recess, a lot of times kids do not have the tools that they need to say, I'm mad, you won, and now you're bragging about it. Instead of having that conversation, the first thing they do is push them or take the ball or whatever. You give the kids the tools to use to be socially appropriate. So when they, again, go on to a job at some point in time, and somebody frustrates them at work, they don't push them. They have the tools in their pocket to say, this is how I confront this person. And really, when you look at kids, this isn't just for kids with behavior problems. This is for all kids, preschool through, everybody can use this. How do we confront somebody when that person's made us mad? A lot of times teachers say, well, I don't have time to teach this in my class to this one kid, 15 minutes a day, how am I supposed to do that? Very easy to put this into a reading curriculum or social studies curriculum, even a science curriculum. You can do experiments on different ways to interact with people and what happens. Very easy to get that in there. That along with the social skills program. Every kid needs a social skills program. And if you have kids that don't need a social skills program, then have them be buddies to those people who do. If you're protesting, this kid is protesting anything about upcoming things that aren't expected, the change in the schedule, giving kids the tools to say, I'm upset with my schedule change. I feel like I've lost control over my day. How am I going to put things in place to get that back? Whether it's kids with the picture schedule and letting them be a part of creating the new one for that day. However, it's going to give them that feeling of being in control of their day. Because a lot of times kids feel that they don't have any sense of anything. They're just here and they're bounced around throughout the day, and they're kind of missing out on being able to make decisions on their own. Kids who run away from a room to escape. One thing that Diana Browning-Wright has said in her trainings are really great. Sometimes kids just need to get out. Give them that room. She has it's called the Australia room. And when you go overseas, you have to get your passport stamped. So the kids have something that says, what, I'm a teacher, I need to get out of class, I need to go to Australia right now. It's not a timeout room, it's not a time away room, it's just a different part of the classroom where that kid can go and kind of, and there's rules set up. You're there for 5 minutes, you're there for 10 minutes, however it's set up in that kid's program. But, give them that option to get away and go to the break center. Also, something that is really effective for kids is the do later file. If they get a worksheet that's got 20 problems on it and that's just too much for them, okay, we'll do 5 now, we'll put it in the do later file, we'll get it done. Sometimes teachers will object to that and say, well, then the kid's not getting done what he needs to do. And really, a lot of times if you look at a worksheet, it's just the same things repeated over and over again, and that kid gets it. Sometimes you have those kids who have ADHD, and they get it, they're done, why do I have to do more? And it frustrates them more. And so instead of having that kid crumple up that paper and throw it on the ground, starting something that's going to escalate, give them the option of putting it in that do later file. Is sometimes all they need. And again, you're setting up rules beforehand. You might have to stay after school for 5 minutes. You might have to come in 5 minutes early. You might have to take it home and finish it. It depends on the teacher and how strict she is that this worksheet has to be done. But that's a really great option for those kids who just are overwhelmed by too much. Or give them the option to say, here's 15 problems. You can cross out 5. As you go along, this one's too hard, cross it out. That works for a lot of those kids too who are overwhelmed. So here we get into the teaching part of the behavior plan. This part gets missed in a lot of behavior plans. They say, okay, here's what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to get, but how are we going to get there? There's a big space in there. You can't just tell a kid you're not going to swear in class anymore and expect it to happen. You've got to go into that teaching and make sure they have those skills for that. My little boy is almost 3, and I've enabled him to become a whiner. He's very bad. He's my baby. I love him, and I let him whine, and I pick him up. And that's the only skill he has now at the age of 3, and it drives my husband crazy. That's how he gets our attention. So now we're kind of moving into a behavior support plan with him where he now has to do something more socially appropriate. He comes up and asks to be picked up. And it's probably harder on me to sit him, but we're giving him those skills. We didn't just say, you're not going to whine anymore. No, that's it. He didn't understand that. He would never get my attention in his mind if he didn't whine. So we've gone through the steps, this is what you need to say. Mommy, will you read me a book? Mommy, can I get a drink of water? And, he's young enough where he's picking up on it right away. And he's still my baby, and I still pick him up. And he drives my husband crazy. But when we get into, this is one of my favorite quotes about kids and teaching. If a kid doesn't know how to read, we teach. If they don't know how to swim, we teach. If they don't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, what do we usually do? We punish. We don't take that time to give them the skills that they need to behave. And a lot of times teachers will say, but they should know how to behave. They're a 7th grader. They've been through this. The fact of the matter is that they've learned a lot of things along the way, and some of them probably aren't good. They've learned from other kids what they've seen. Nobody's taken the time to sit down and teach them the correct way to walk into a classroom and get your homework out and sit down and be prepared. Here's the functionally equivalent behavior replacement behavior checklist. When we're coming up with the behavior, so we've got the behavior that we want to replace. We want to replace the kid punching somebody in the arm to get their behavior. We know we want to replace that with having them come up and say, hey, how are you doing? So we need to look and see, are those two behaviors equivalent? Are they going to get him the same things? Hopefully, yes. They're hopefully going to get him attention from a peer. Is it something that the student can easily do? Sure. Can he hit somebody as easily as he could say, hey, how you doing? Yep, pretty comparable. How is that student going to be taught to do that? We can't just say, you're not going to punch him anymore, you're going to come up and say hi. Somebody needs to work with that kid on a socially appropriate way to do that. Are we going to set him up with a peer tutor and they're going to do that? Is a teacher going to model it for him? Who's going to reinforce that behavior? Is that going to work in class? Is this something that's going to be easy for this kid to do in class? Sure, it's going to be easier for him to say, hi, how are you doing, and walk up and punch somebody, so it should work. And is it something that's easily acknowledgeable? Do we know when this kid is doing it and when somebody's going to be there to verbally praise him and say, good job? Yes. So this is a good checklist when we're looking at finding that replacement behavior to make sure it's something that the kid can easily do. So now when we get into, here's still number 10. We need to make sure that when we get to number 10, we are looking back. Now we're going to be looking at the strategies and what we're going to do. Look back at the information that you've gathered. This is a flowing document. It goes together. We didn't collect this information and write this stuff down to say, okay, forget it, and now we're going to write the plan. We need to make sure we're looking back. Look back and see what was the function of the behavior that we've already come up with. It's in line 8. We've got it written down. Okay. The function of the behavior of the hitting was for him to gain somebody's attention. Okay, so we know that. Now on line 9, what did we say he was going to do to replace that? He was going to go up and say, hi, how are you doing? And we're going to look at the problem behavior in the environment that was supporting, or what was supporting that behavior in that environment. And we can say he was being supported by the other kids in the classroom were responding to him and engaging in a conversation. So now we've got all that information put together for number 10. And now we're going to look and see what needs to be done to teach that behavior. Who is responsible? Okay. And so then we look at, now we've got that done. We know who's going to teach it, how it's going to be taught. We're going to use a peer in the classroom to go through it with him. And then he's going to model it, and then the student's going to model it, and then we're going to reward it when we see it, because we have to let this kid know that he's doing it right. Then we're going to look at the reinforcing part of it. And when we talk about reinforcers and we talk about rewards, we have to look at the distinction between the two. A reinforcer is something that we know is going to work to reinforce it. We know that with this kid that's walking up and hitting people, it reinforces him to get peer attention. So that's something that we need to continue in order to get this new behavior of saying, hi, how are you doing, to stick with this kid. We need to make sure that the rest of the class isn't just ignoring him now that he's got this positive behavior going on. A reward is something that we hope the kid will strive to earn, but we're not sure if it's going to work. That would be something like, okay, he's going to also, along with the peer support he's going to get, we're also going to do a sticker chart, and when he gets 10 stickers, he gets to be first in line for lunch. We don't know that that's going to work right away. We know that the peers are going to support him, that his interaction with peers is going to keep supporting him. We're not sure about the sticker chart. So that's kind of more of a reward until we know that it works, and yes, he's working to be reinforced. Now, we would like it to just be the reinforcement of the peers, reinforcing, because that's natural, and that's something that adults and everybody kind of strives for. But if we have a kid who's learning a behavior that they're not real keen on changing, sometimes they also need some sort of reward system that will work on reinforcing that behavior as well. Depends on the kid, it depends on the severity of the behavior. When we talk about reinforcers, we need to be very specific with them. Are we going to do a sticker chart? Are we going to do a checklist for maybe for those older kids in high school? Are we going to do a check-in, check-out program where somebody's going to be going through every day, and if he gets 3s and he gets to add up his points at the end of the day, then he'll get some sort of reinforcer for that. You need to be very specific on what it's going to be. And we also need to make sure that it is given with that problem behavior or with the desired behavior that we're trying to change. Sometimes with kids, when we talk about the frequency and the immediacy that needs to be there, those younger kids need it right away. Those kids who have been through 15 behavior plans and nothing has worked, they need it right away when you're first starting out, because they need to know what's going to work, they need to know what it's about, they need to make sure that what they've signed up for and what they have agreed to with this behavior plan is actually going to be done. It needs to be very consistent. That's probably one of the biggest things with behavior plans and why they fall by the wayside, is that they'll start doing them, and it does take more at first. And sometimes that can be hard for teachers and frustrating for kids, and so then they kind of get dropped, and they're never going to work if you don't let them get past those first few weeks of implementation with fidelity. It needs to be done consistently, and that's where we're going to hit a lot of roadblocks too. And I get a lot of teachers who say, "Oh, we've been doing this for a couple weeks and it's not working." Well, let me see your data. What have you been doing? What types of rewards have you given him? A lot of times things are working, but we expect kids to be perfect right away. Maybe he's gone from 15 behaviors a week to 9. That's great. He's getting better. It's not going to be overnight, but things will change. And giving that kid choice with variety. Kids get stuck on something every day. If you got a cookie every day, and you kind of get sick of having the cookie, you need to want a candy bar. So just kind of giving them a variety. Ask the kids what they want. Some examples of different types of reinforcers. The physical, the high fives. Make sure this is where it comes in. You really need to know your kids. Do they not like to be touched? Would be giving them a pat on the back. Scare them into never doing that behavior you're trying to reinforce again. Verbal works a lot better with younger kids. Sometimes when you get those high school kids, they don't want you to sit there and praise them for handing in their homework. Again, that would deter them from doing it again. You have to know your kids and what's going to work. That's why you sit down as a team and go through this. Activity access, a lot of times computer time, or getting to listen to an iPod during class, or getting to go leave the parking lot 5 minutes early for those kids who drive is a big reinforcer for kids. Tangibles, positive phone calls home. A lot of times you'll get high school students who say, I'm in trouble at home, I did something wrong at home, but I've been doing really good at school. Can you call my mom and tell her how good I've been doing? Kids love that, especially if they're working really hard, and being able to have that conversation with the parent that tells them, maybe he's had some problems at home, but man, he's had his homework in 3 days this week. Kids really appreciate that, and they'll work hard for that. Points and tokens works really good for the little kids. Privileges. A lot of times if you have kids who are overwhelmed with things and their assignments are too big, giving them the option of, if you get this done, then you don't have to do this, or you can skip a quiz, or you get extra points on the quiz, or whatever. That's a lot for those kids who feel that the work that sometimes if they feel that the work that they do doesn't pay off, and why am I doing this and it's just stupid, you give them something that kind of helps them lead into, well, if you're going to do this, then you cannot do this, because it seems like the same for them. We're going over the same thing over and over again. We hear that a lot. Here's just the next pages of that functional behavior assessment. Here we get into what do we do? Okay, we've got all this stuff set up now. Here's how we're going to try to change this behavior. But what do we do if this behavior occurs again? If you have the big physical behaviors where you have maybe the hitting and the kicking, we're going to look at what the adults are going to do here. A lot of times this is where it gets put back on the kid. We put all this stuff in place and nothing changed. the behavior happened again, and instead of staff going through the appropriate steps, they kind of stepped in and escalated the behavior. It's very important to get a plan in place for what's going to happen if we see this behavior again. What's the adult going to do to make sure that behavior plan gets kicked back in? Work on, when a behavior starts, it's not the time to jump in and try to remind the kid, you're not doing your behavior plan, you're not going to get this, you messed up for the day, you're done. And there's no reason for the kid to calm down after hearing that. So we need to work on some specific things that teachers can say in order to bring that kid back to a workable, teachable moment. So we look at prompting to the verb, that replacement behavior. If you're in those first stages and you notice that kid, if the kid who crumples up the paper and throws it on the floor, remind them, your replacement behavior is you get to put that paper into the do later file. Sometimes kids just forget or they get frustrated and their first reaction is that. Sometimes they can bring it back and they say, yep, you're right, I'll do this. Go put that back in there. When we get into kind of those reactive strategies, this is where we get into the, okay, now do we just, a lot of times we need to write in there and we back away from him at this time. We encourage him to go sit. We're not going to escalate the problem. And a power struggle with a kid is just the point where, again, we're changing how teachers have dealt with behavior in the past, and it's hard to change that for some teachers. But if you have it written in a program and says, this is what we do at this stage, you're also kind of giving power back to the teachers, because then they can say, I didn't have to keep confronting him because in his plan it says I'm supposed to do this. This is my power. Instead of having to take power of the child, they say, okay, this is what's been decided, and this is the next step. So they don't feel like they have to kind of save face with the kid. A lot of times that's how we see those behaviors get escalating. And then once they get to the part where the behavior is over, that hopefully it's been not taken to a level where there's any type of confrontation that goes on. Hopefully in the program it's set up so that doesn't happen. The only time that we talk about the behavior is after that child is all the way calm. And that's something, again, that teachers need to have written down and be reminded of. And it's a practice thing. If changing teacher behavior is the same way as teaching parent behavior. They've been practicing this for 10, 15 years. This is their natural reaction to a problem. So giving them the out to say, what, I can't talk with you right now. We're going to talk about this later, and then going through the debriefing phase. When you write a behavior plan, there's going to be a lot more steps in there, depending on the behavior. I mean, if you have a kid who's throwing a paper on the floor, and that's how it starts, and then it can end up into that kid having to be suspended or restrained, hopefully not. And again, never put restraints into an IEP. Never do that. If a teacher wants to put restraint or seclusion into your child's IEP, say no. It's not legal. Don't do it. Not a good idea. But if it does if you do have a student who ends up in those kinds of situations, there's a lot more steps that need to be written into that IEP or that behavior plan. And then sometimes are there consequences or punishment type things that need to be put into the behavior plan. Punishment is an icky word and I don't like it, but sometimes schools say, this is what we need to do, and trying to come up with a way that's good for both the school and the student. Number 13 is the behavior goals, and I think you should have a paper that looks like this. This is the top says a format for the functionally equivalent replacement behavior. This is a great tool to have when you're writing a program. It helps you break it down into the different steps. There's two different types. We're just going to go over the one today. It starts out easy enough. By when? When do we expect this to the students to have mastered this goal? Put a date in there. It's not set in stone. A lot of times we get goals set for kids, and if they don't meet it by a certain date, then we throw everything out the window and start over again. We have to look at the progress that the kid has made. Student's name. And then you're just going to take the information that you've already collected and put it in here step by step. I'm going to skip through this kind of quickly. And then if we look at ongoing progress monitoring, how are we going to communicate between the parent and the school? This, again, is written into this behavior plan. It's not something that's written up and then we have to call 3 weeks later to find out how things are going. It's something that, is there going to be an email home daily? Is there going to be a call home daily? Is it going to be only when the kid has the behavior, or is it going to be every day whether there was a behavior or not? And what's it going to be? Is it going to be an email? Is it going to say, Jimmy had a great day? Or is it going to say, Jimmy's morning did this and this? Be very specific. What information do you need to hear from the teacher every day to know how your kid is doing? And it should be vice versa too. If you have something that's going on, he had a great morning. So, a lot of times I know my kids, I send them out the van door in the morning and we fought, and I have to call the teacher because my oldest will go into the school crabby, and then that's when she has behavior problems all the time. And I know if she starts off her day that way, that just to warn her teacher helps a lot. And it gets him kind of backing off her right away, because if he confronts her at the door, then even saying, oh, looks like you're having a grumpy day, she's done. So being able to have that two-way kind of conversation, communication between the teacher. Here's a great form, and I don't think I've sent this one, but who's going to participate? Is it going to be the teacher that's sending it, or is it going to be the principal? Is it going to be the counselor who's going to send this information back and forth? Under what conditions, like we talked about? So this is kind of breaking those 6 things up into, again, one of these charts that makes it easy to look at and for everybody to kind of understand. It says, sales, if it gets any worse, I suppose we could try to improve our product. And when we look at behavior support plans that are out there, it kind of seems like they're very, I've seen like one-page behavior gathering form, and everything is on there, and this is the program written at the bottom. And there's no say to why the behavior is happening, or how we're going to replace it, or what we're going to teach. And we can't quite figure out why this kid's just, continuing to have this behavior. We need to look at a product like this behavior support plan that's comprehensive. And I can't say enough good things about Diana Browning-Wright, and she just knows. She's worked with kids for years. She's very good. Visit her website, that Penn website. If you ever see where she's in Sioux Falls or anywhere across the state, I would totally recommend going and getting information from her. And we do hope to bring her in, and she's going to look at doing some accommodations in the classroom for students with behavior issues. So she's great. If you see her name, Diana Browning-Wright, find out more. Are there any questions on this? It's a lot of information. When Diana did the training, this was a whole day training on just this, and it was a lot easier when you can go through and have a specific child in mind and fill it out. So trying to chop through it here in 50 minutes is kind of a lot. But if you're interested in using this with your school and you want some more information, I can sure sit down either over the phone or DDN or here in person and go through it and try to get you more familiar with this. If you want your school to look at it and say, this is something that we might want to adapt, I can sure sit down with the school and talk to them about it too. Yes?
I have a question. I hope it's not too specific, but it seems to me that one difficulty that children have that have attention problems is the distractibility in the classroom. When you have desks that are all facing each other in these little pods, I was just observing the student the other day, and I was just amazed at the number of distractions just from watching children around you. Is that a recommendation you can make? Can you please put the table, the desks in rows?
It is, and I've talked with some teachers who say, this year my classroom is just out of control. I have, 3 or 4 kids with ADHD, and that's one of the first things that we look at is how are kids sitting. Even as much as you have the 3 kids with ADHD sitting, close to each other, are they spread out? It's just really, sometimes when you get those first, second year teachers, they just don't pick up on things like that right away. And yes, and sometimes you'll see the kids all in a pod and then the one kid sitting off to the side. I don't like that. That's just my personal opinion, but man, does that set that kid out there and he doesn't feel like he's part of a group, he feels different. And you'll see that a lot of times too with kids, even little kids sit in circle time, and you have the one kid that just can't sit in circle time, so they're sitting back in a chair. To me, that sets that kid up and sets the rest of the class up to say, well, he's just a little different, he doesn't belong with us. So I like to, instead of doing that, making it, you can do pod time if you want, to do certain projects, but if you're having problems in your class and you have kids talking and problems getting their attention, really setting them off to themselves so they have that extra space is good for kids. And that is something that you can say. You can definitely recommend being able to move those desks in a different way. Yep. Are there any other questions? I'm going to get into the competing behaviors pathway real quick here. This, again, like I said, is very necessary when it comes to taking that information and mapping out what you want this kid to do. Real quickly, when we look at it, we look at the upper pathway. As this is what we want the kids to do. Those things on top, that's what the kids are doing in the classroom, all the other kids are doing in the classroom. That middle pathway is what the student you're focusing on is doing, and that's typically the problem behavior that you're seeing. And that bottom box there is going to look at that replacement behavior that you're going to put in there. We know, but not everybody knows that kid's not going to come in that first day that he's on a behavior plan and be doing what the rest of the kids are doing in class. So if we look at Michael here, it's very important that we also fill out these boxes the way that they're numbered on this colored sheet. The first thing you want to look at is that color box, that red color box. What's the behavior? This is why we're here. This is what we're focusing on. The next box that you want to look at is this, the desired alternative. What is everybody else in that class doing at the time? In Michael's class, when he is refusing to follow directions and he swears and hits, everybody else in his class is sitting and completing their work. Their reward for that, their typical consequences, the consequences that all the kids get, is the third box to fill out. Those kids are getting good grades. They are, I like sometimes their reward is they get their next assignment. I don't know that that's really a reward, but that's the consequences that they get. And you have those kids who don't have the behavior problems and they just keep going along and they're fine with getting the next assignment. So now you have those three boxes filled out. You want to look at those, again, the triggering antecedents, the things that are happening before the behavior. You have to know what's going on before. And in Michael's case, he's being asked to do independent work that's too difficult for him. We know it's going to be too difficult for him. So we give it to him anyway, and then he has a behavior, and then we wonder why. The next thing we need to look at are the maintaining consequences. Why does he keep having the swearing and the hitting and the not following directions? He's doing it because he gets to avoid the task. He's getting out of having to do his work every time he has this behavior. So now we have this nice little map of what's going on. I had mentioned before the setting events. That's his first thing. There may or may not be something here. There doesn't always have to be. Here we can say that during passing time, there's an altercation with somebody. We know that when Michael and Timmy see each other in the hallway, they're going to fight. Timmy's mean to Michael. Michael comes into the classroom crabby. He feels dumb. He feels like he doesn't get it. He feels sad about himself, and we know that that's going to trigger this behavior more than on a typical day when he doesn't see Timmy in the hallway. The last thing that we're going to look at is then, okay, now what is the acceptable verb, that replacement behavior that we're going to have for Timmy, or for Michael, when he gets work that's too difficult for him? Instead of sending him down that middle row that we know that he knows how to go down, and it's worked for him in the past, what are we going to accept for him at this time so he doesn't have that behavior? We're going to accept from him that he asks for a break or to take a time away in the classroom. That's what we're going to accept for him now. But we're going to constantly be teaching him the skills that he needs to get him up to that desired pathway in the future. Not tomorrow, not next week, maybe not next month, maybe not ever. Maybe we're always going to have to accept this for him. But during the time that we're letting him take a break or use the do later file, we're giving him the skills that he needs. He needs academic skills. It's too hard for him. So is he going to be able to catch up academically? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he'll never be on that top path. But the bottom line is, if he's getting through class without swearing and hitting, and he's getting his work done, and he's understanding what he's doing, and class is going on, and the teacher's able to teach, and everybody in the classroom is able to learn, and we're avoiding the behavior, we're not giving him a free pass from ever having to do work again. But we're going to be teaching him the skills that he's going to need to maybe get up on that desired pathway. Maybe he's in first grade and he needs these skills and he's going to be able to build on it and he's going to be able to catch up. Maybe he's an 11th grader and by his senior year he might not make to that top path. But we are still going to be teaching him the skills along the way. So who can start this whole process of the behavior plan? Parents can request it. You can request it just like you request an IEP meeting. And I would use the word request or demand. If you know that your student needs this, if you're getting the calls weekly and you know that he knows this, you go in and you say, look, this is what we're going to do. It's your kid, and I know it can be intimidating to go in there. Even last year, my daughter had a lot of behavior problems with her teacher, and it was intimidating for me to go in and sit down with a principal and a teacher and say, even knowing what I know, this is their school and I'm going in there and it's scary. And for my voice to be heard and say, this is what we're going to do with my daughter, because they had the school counselor there and she's dealt with this before in the past, and but she hasn't dealt with my daughter for the past 8 years, 9 years. She doesn't know my daughter. So you're the experts on your kids. It's very important to know that. Teachers can request it as well. Things to remember, it's a team process. And we're working with students along the way, whether it's a teaching process or coming up with that behavior replacement, that verb. We need to validate their feelings. Somebody along the line needs to tell these kids it's okay to be frustrated in math class. We understand that you don't understand fractions. I know it's frustrating for you, and make sure that they're included in that plan. Talking about giving it time, this plan, a lot of times, like I said, if it doesn't happen in the first few days, then it goes by the wayside. Usually we say 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. 4 weeks to see kind of a change in that behavior, 6 weeks to the point where maybe now we can start backing off on some of the things that we're doing and see how they're going to do. Never back totally off. A lot of times, okay, the kid's fine, and then we kind of throw the plan out the window, and it goes right back to the same behaviors. Always back off slowly with the intentions of we can come and move back into the plan. Extinction bursts, I don't know if you're familiar with that. A lot of times the plan starts to kind of work, and that kid gives it one last shot. Gosh darn it, they're kind of serious about this. I'm going to really up the ante today, and instead of just hitting and swearing, I'm going to start kicking and throwing desks and see what happens. See if they hang tough with that plan or see if they let it go, because the kid's going to try to get out of it if you can. And making sure, again, you're reevaluating. Who sees the behavior plan? Make sure that all the kids' teachers, even if they're just having problems in reading class, if you have a 7th grader, in English, make sure that all the teachers are seeing what's going on. I'm going to jump through because I think that we're out of time. So I'm going to stop here. Are there any more questions? I know Lisa wants to do a final roll call. Yes?
What is the difference between a behavior support plan and an IEP and
You don't need to, your kid does not need to be on an IEP to have a behavior support plan. Any kid can have, my daughter's not on an IEP, but we did a behavior support plan with her. And it's not part of the IEP. There's that section in there, that behavior impedes learning. And if you have a nice behavior plan written up, you can always put in there, C behavior plan. They can go together. They can be totally separate. It just depends on what works best for that kid in that school. So yeah, a lot of times people think that when my kid's not on an IEP, they can't be on a behavior plan. Any kid can be on a behavior plan.
This is a very basic question because we haven't had to get to this point with my son. But say we do feel this is necessary, I just go to the teacher and say I want to be here, and she should know what I'm talking about.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But if you go in and you say, you know what, my student needs this. This is what's happening, and kindergarten, you said, perfect time to start working on this, because a lot of times we think, kindergartners, and they have these cute little behaviors and they're loud and whatever. By the time they get to 5th grade, it's the most annoying behavior in the world. This is what happened with my daughter. And so being able to squash that behavior when they're little. And kindergarten teachers, they might not know a lot about behavior support plans. A lot of times In kindergarten, it's just getting them into the process of school, and they don't work a lot with behavior when really we can start there. So my suggestion to you, I mean, if you want to bring this in and say, you know what, maybe they don't need all this, maybe it's not there yet, but we do need to look at the function of the behavior. We do need to look at what we're going to replace that behavior with, and we need to look at how we're going to teach this kid the skills that he needs. So those might be the 3 things to start with, and say, you know what, because I don't want my son to be in trouble, you know, in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade. I want to be proactive. Both teachers and parents benefit, and kids obviously benefit a lot from being proactive.
Okay, and to jump on in again, if these forms are on our website, sdparent.org, sdparent.org, our 800 number again, 800-640-4553. We can send these materials to you. We also have information we can provide you on functional behavioral assessments, and we can visit with you at Parent Connection about strategies to request this from your school if you're a little hesitant, so that you can feel empowered when you go in and request this. I'm going to make a quick roll call of sites. Please let me know how many are at each site, to see if we can do this before we're turned off. Anybody in Aberdeen, and how many? Brookings. Chamberlain?
9.
9 in Chamberlain. How many are in Brookings?
No, 9 in Brookings.
Oh, 9 in Brookings. How many in Chamberlain? Oh, we're disconnected. Okay. Well, they have the number. They can contact us. All right. Thanks very much. And actually, Becky's here, so if you have further questions for Becky, please. Yes. Take advantage of the specialist right here.
Yes.
I guess I'm in the same situation as you, as I've got a son that maybe rides the fence with some behaviors, and he's in 5th grade now, and you look back and you think maybe it would have been a lot wiser to start off. You know, I remember those early times where you'd get the notes from school that he was pushing or kicking or being aggressive, or doing silly things in the classroom. You know, I guess it's almost surprising to me that the teachers don't bring that forward through a guidance counselor or something, because I feel like I have to go get educated enough to talk with the teacher, and it's very challenging. But I guess one of the questions then that I had is there any like label in the school system or consequence for having your child on a special behavior plan or IEP or whatever? You know, do they somehow like look at these kids and think, oh gosh, it's one of those? Or
The hope is that it's not
And
that
there's
way.
actually something called FERPA that should protect your students,
Yep.
which is, everybody knows what HIPAA is, you know, confidentiality. FERPA is for educational records, educational records. If students are on IEPs, their diagnoses, all those kinds of things should be confidential. So other than the participants who need to know, you know, there is a right to expect that type of confidentiality and to demand that, you know, if your student has a behavior plan, you know, the teacher is working with your student, you know, the principal, the people that need to know should know. But it, you know, it should not be a matter of public broadcast, and if it is, then those are some issues that can be addressed by the school, because those are some an infringement on educational records release.
But I know, like with my daughter, going from 4th grade to 5th grade, she had the label as the naughty kid, and she was given to the best fitting teacher for her, and it's worked out really well. But she did come with the, you know, with the stipulation of she's mouthy, and she, you know, her behaviors were thrown out there. And it does happen, and I don't know what you do about it.
maybe I should ask a different question. Sometimes I look at where my son is at, and I think, you know, if we would have had a behavioral plan for him, could we have avoided doing the ADHD diagnosis and medication? And sometimes I think maybe we could have.
I think a lot of it, again, it goes back to that teaching. A lot of times what we see with the kids with ADHD is they just don't know how to handle themselves when they feel this way inside. What do we do? And if they don't have those skills, they come up with things on their own. And being able, if you have a behavior plan in place where you can say, when you're feeling anxious, this is what you're going to do, instead of yelling out or running around the classroom, and giving them those things when they're young, it does help them. It definitely is one of those things where being proactive is beneficial.
I have concerns. I think at the beginning of the program you mentioned something about the 12-year-old that's entering middle school. That's next for us, and I do have concerns about being able to take that next step and taking these borderline behaviors and are they going to become more positive or not, and how do I
not.
Yeah, usually that
Middle
switch.
school is very challenging for kids with organizational and attention difficulties. It's really, really tough, more so than high school.
Yep, and that's why that 5th grade year is really important, because teachers, in general, for all kids, should be teaching them the skills that they're going to need for middle school. And then if you have kids who have extra needs with the ADHD, giving them those extra supports. So, you're going to be in a jumble of kids and your locker is going to be messy. Here's what you do, here's how we're going to work on doing that. And it really is up to the teachers to help them make that transition smooth, whether they're the kid that can survive in any environment or kids that need a lot of extra help.
And it's never too late to, you can request an IEP meeting when new information is available or there's issues to resolve. So most parents, I have a student that, it was very typical that at the beginning of each year with each new student, the reality is information passed and shared? Not so much. So if you want that to happen, you need to request an IEP meeting with all of the teachers, and those that can't make it, you can visit with afterwards, to say, this is my student, and these are their strengths, and this is their issues, and this is how it looks on them. When they're doing this thing, this is what it means. This is a manifestation of the particular challenge they have, so that they get that. And then start right away with those behavior plans. Don't wait until there's an issue, because then they're already going to be frustrated. The teachers are going to be frustrated. It's going to be much harder. So really be empowered to be proactive, to start your kids and the teachers off on the right foot, because they want to be successful as much as you do. And frankly, my student is a senior this year, and I have one time in all this year with all these teachers, I've had one teacher say to me, I checked and I saw that she was an IEP and we did this and this. That was one and only time in 18 years that I heard that. I have completed paperwork and I have sent emails and, go to visit with me. Oh, I didn't know. Really? Thanks for telling me. So take it upon yourself to introduce yourself and introduce your kids. And I just learned every year to say, we are here to support our kid to be successful in school, and I am here to support you. So, I expect them to do the work. I expect them to be here 100% of the time. I expect them to do 100% of their homework. But these are their capabilities. These are some issues. So we need to make sure that what we ask is appropriate for her particular set of issues. So I am willing to work with you. But, and I'm here to support you to make my daughter successful. And going in with that, working with them, partnering with them, really helps to be proactive really early on, rather than waiting until you go in and say, listen, you're frustrating my kid, what's wrong with you, how come you didn't look at the IEP, you should know this. Maybe yes, but it's not going to make you any friends.
And I always think with my daughter, a little, I don't like to call them bribes, but if you, go in to talk to teachers, bring them some cookies, bring them a candy bar, say, can we have a meeting? Can we sit down and talk? Can we, I baked these cookies for you. This is my daughter. It helps them remember you. It helps them remember the kid. It sets off a good relationship.
Also known as the care and feeding of educators 101.
Right. If you have food, they will appreciate it, and it helps, kind of open that door and start a conversation with teachers when it isn't
please,
friendly.
Let them know when things are going right. Let them know if, if my kid comes home and they had a great day because her teacher was playing jokes and made him feel good. He had a really great day. Thank you. She really appreciated your sense of humor. The best thing a teacher ever did, my kid has ADHD, chronic homework issue, losing problems. I all know that. The smartest thing a teacher ever did was to say,
hey, guess what? And would regularly. These are the students who have no missing assignments today. Blue, blue, blue. You know, took one time. Do you think she ever had a late assignment in that class ever again? No. She was the only student that day when the teacher said that had all her assignments in. Probably the first time in her whole life in any class she actually had assignments in. And so she came home feeling like, I mean, that's all I heard about. I mean, do you think she ever missed an assignment in that class? No. That was one smart teacher. That's how you reinforce kids, really.
Yep, let them have that success somehow. Because if you don't feel like you ever do anything right, then you kind of give up.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I'm finally catching on to that.
Yeah.
After all these years.
Yeah.
If you don't ever let them feel like they're doing it right.
Yeah.
I feel like, after learning things here tonight, that I almost need to write this plan and show up to them and say, hey, do you guys agree that, is this...
Right.
I mean, I guess I would have looked at it differently, saying, I'm coming to you as the educators to tell me how best to make this happen, but it sounds like I really need to tell them, this is my student, these are the challenges that we need to work with.
Yep. If you walk in there with a tool that says, you know what, I've thought about this, I put the time in, I know, what needs to be done, I would go in there and say, yeah, and then just, this is what I think. Do you agree with me? Okay, well, let's go. This is what we're going to do. And kind of go with it because, there are only a few short months until middle school starts. I'm in the same boat. I'm dreading that transition. But
So one of the huge challenges in that is that right now we have mainly one teacher to work with that gets to know your child, especially if you talk with them frequently.
Yeah.
Where then soon you'll have maybe 5 or 6 different teachers.
Yeah.
And feel empowered to ask for an IEP meeting immediately after school starts with all of the teachers, and be prepared to go in there and say, this is my student, and even have a 1-page about these are the things that they're great at. These are the supports that we expect as parents, and this is how we're going to support you as educators by having our kids there, by expecting that we have homework, and these are their special needs, and this is how it looks on them. So that, because they're usually, well, thanks, this really helps them. And really it's going to save them frustration, because they want to be successful as teachers too.
Can we come consult with you folks to...
Parent Connection, absolutely. We are parents just like you. I mean, we are here to talk with you, to give you strategies, to give you information. When things are tough, we have navigators that can go with you to meetings. And if it's really, if your student's civil rights are being abridged, we're going to make that referral to advocacy where you have legal folks saying, we are here to protect the student's right to a free and appropriate home and education. Parents and students have wonderful protections under IDEA, but if they don't know about them and they don't exercise them, they're not of any use. So if you have a student on the IEP and you don't have this guide, get one before you leave. How many of you have students in IEPs? Okay, do you have this?
No, I've got one now.
Oh, you do? Okay. Do not be alarmed. This is the most useful, long-term, easy-to-read resource you will ever find on any topic. There's a whole section on functional behavioral assessments on here, on positive behavior plans. It's right in here, step by step, how you do it, what you do, why you do, how to ask, parent tips.
I use that book all the time in my office because it's so easy to use. If I need a law or something, instead of looking through our big federal regs book, it's like, oh, I know what's in here and it's right here, and it explains it in normal people's speech instead of federal law because I don't
And we many times will have families that say, okay, would you prove this for me? Would you help me decide, how would you strategize what's the best way for me to do this? Absolutely. We are parents just like you, and we're here to support you, to learn the skills you need, to do it yourself, be the best advocate you can for your kids, help your kids learn to advocate for themselves, and then help other parents. So, it's we're building the next generation of parent leaders. So, absolutely, give us a call. That's what we're here for.
I guess it's like anything, you kind of talk a different language. I wouldn't look at my son and think he's special ed at all because he gets really good grades, etc. And so I wouldn't really have thought to contact you before.
We serve families with kids with any special health need, from diabetes to cancer, kids on IEPs, kids not on IEPs. We say birth to 26. The truth is, we get families who are expecting, who are expectant and know that they have a child with a spina bifida or any number of Families can have perfectly healthy kids one day, and the next day they have a child who's an amputee or a victim of an accident or injury or illness, and suddenly is thrust into this field. So there are many categories. There are 14 categories for protections under IDEA. So a student can qualify under 14 different categories, very wide ranging, including emotional behavioral disorders, other health impairment, which can include things like ADHD. But there's also a protection for the kids that don't meet IEPs, that don't meet those categories. There are 504 plans. These are basic civil rights protections. Kids have a right to a free and appropriate public education. And if their disability or illness or whatever they may have prevents them from accessing it, then the school has a responsibility to accommodate their special needs. Simple as that.
IEP doesn't automatically mean special education.
No.
It's an individualized education plan, and it can be just somebody that has ADHD, that's a high functioning, at an education level and everything like that, but just can't sit still long enough.
A student can have an IEP and be a genius.
Yep.
But they may be in a wheelchair and be a paraplegic.
But I'm surprised I got to the point with my son in like 2nd or 3rd grade where the teachers or the counselor or somebody decided that we all needed to meet because these behaviors were not appropriate or in control enough for the classroom or the school. So we had that kind of a meeting to say, hey, this is what we've tried as educators. We've tried the wiggle seat and all these different things to.
But that was apparently just an informal meeting, not truly an IEP.
Right.
So,
Written down.
we maybe can talk. You can give us a call at the office later, because does your student have an IEP or a 501? Okay, then you need to submit a written formal request for an evaluation for special services. If your student is in need of special services to be successful in school, and having behaviors that impedes their ability to learn, their ability to be in the classroom, impedes their ability to access their education. So, yeah, give us a call tomorrow. We'll take our brochure. You can talk to anybody in the office, and we send out every day to families. Here's kind of the template. One page, easy to do. Submit a request. Here's how you do it. Here's what you include. Less is more. A simple one page. And they have 45 days to complete that and then have a determination hearing. And so, those kinds of things we will walk you through so you know what to expect.
Can I ask a question? What happens during those 45 days? They've got 45 days to respond. The behaviors are going to continue. The supports aren't going to be there.
Because they're doing an evaluation doesn't mean they can't do a behavior plan, doesn't mean they can't be doing some other types of things. What it does say is that you believe your child needs special education services, so they have to do a complete academic, psychological, social family history, and other types of assessments to make sure, to gauge where this child is, to see what areas might be impacted. And then they're going to take all this document, including if you have medical diagnoses, if there are other kinds of things going on, you want to submit that information for consideration, and then there will be a meeting where all this is reviewed and they look at the basic categories and determine if your student is eligible. And you are part of that team, and you can say, I do not agree with this determination. What do we need to have done? You have the right to ask for an independent evaluation in areas if you believe that the school assessment overlooked something or did not address the problem. So there again, we can kind of help you with all of those different strategies about what is available to you without cost as a family, how to access the system, and if your student qualifies, great. If not, then what's the process for requesting consideration of a 504 plan? It really is straightforward, but it's very complex, and so just having somebody that's been there and can kind of help guide you through the maze is helpful. Thank you.
Yep, and our office is always available too if you have questions. You don't have to.
And they are wonderful, and the Department of Education website is wonderful, lots of information. If you look at forums and publications, that's what's called, or forums and.
Well, they changed our website, and I don't like it, so I kind of
It-
protesting.
but there's,
I'll show 'em.
and if you can't find it, call us and we'll tell you or we'll send you the link. But,
It's, yeah.
you know, our South Dakota Department of Education, Special Education Services are fabulous.
We have great staff in our
Fabulous.
office. We really do.
And where are you located? Because you're obviously.
I'm out of Sioux Falls. Our office is in Pierre. I lived there for a year, and then we moved back here. And so I'm kind of on the satellite office, but we travel a lot, so it works good that I'm here and there.
Do you have a physical building here?
I work out of my home. I
You
work
do?
in my,
Okay.
my dungeon.
And this South Dakota Department of Education, like all of our departments of, you know, our state agencies are all in here. But they're very user friendly and lots of information on their site. And give us a call at Parent Connection and tell us what you're looking for, and we'll cut to the chase and we'll get you kind of the boiled down bullet points what you're looking for, and help you get you started. We really try to. It's like this guide. We try to boil it down, make it as easy as possible, cut through the, gobbledygook.
Federal language is confusing.
Right, and kind of give it to you parent to parent. Here's how it is, here's how you access this, here's what you do, and if you hear a no, not a problem. The next step is we're going to get past it. All right, and we'll try you how.